Michael, it took me a minute to size you up. Anarchist. Funny,
Okay,
not
sure.
a conservative,
No.
troublemaker.
Yes. They call me that in North Korea. I have one shot. Life is a great gift. What kind of person do I want to be? And that answer is clearly Dennis Prager.
Do you think there is any role of government whatsoever?
No. I don't like the term big government because there's no such thing as big government. Our current government is, what, $4 trillion?
I'm assuming you would say yes on dismantling Department of Education.
Well, that's an understatement. Government schools are literal prisons for children. You triggered me.
Michael, so it took me a minute to size you up. Let me know if I got this right.
Extra small.
Extra small. Anarchist. Funny, but incredibly scary.
Okay.
Because of your book.
Okay.
Not a conservative.
No.
Not a leftist, but very curious about ideology and politics. And so, did I get it about right?
Sure. It depends what your meaning of leftist is. I think people use that word in different meanings.
How would you describe yourself?
The little engine that could but shouldn't.
Troublemaker.
Yes. They call me that in North Korea. You're a troublemaker. I was with my guide, and North Koreans are extremely socially conservative on a level Americans don't have. Like, it's that intense. And we're with these dancing waitresses, and they had these books, How to Learn English, North Korean to English. And North Koreans don't have like running water, really. They have like communal baths. And there's like no deodorant in the country because they're very clean people. So I'm reading it, and one of the things is, will you help me move my car? Like push my car, excuse me. And then one of them was, would you like to take a bath together? And my guide read that, and I go, oh, and she's, oh, and she's like, you're a troublemaker. You're a troublemaker. Yeah.
So did they like you?
Oh, yes. Everyone loves a troublemaker.
Yeah. When I first heard about you and I started looking into your work, I kept thinking about Ayn Rand. And then you came out with this book and you wrote a whole chapter about Ayn Rand. I was like, I knew it. What kind of impact did she have on you? And why is she such a huge figure in your philosophical development?
Let me get my Rand cred. Okay. I own her copy of The Fountainhead. I own both books that she wrote in Russia from 1925, 1926. I have the handwritten notes from The Fountainhead when she's working out in her manuscript, the ages of the characters. I got it all. The best part of my Rand collection, which I just acquired in the last few months, was in 1957 when Atlas Shrugged was being published. Her husband said, I'm taking you to a nice fancy dinner. And they went to this big hotel in New York, which name I forget, everyone knows it. And she walks in with her husband, and it's all her friends and everyone at Random House, the publisher, and they go, surprise! And Ayn Rand says, what does she say? I do not approve of surprises. And the dinner is extremely awkward. And per Barbara Brandon, her biographer, the only thing that kind of mitigated the situation was Random House, per a story element in Atlas Shrugged, had custom-made cigarette boxes that said, who is John Galt? They know at Random House, with cigarettes with the $sign on them in the box. And I just got a box of those cigarettes. So my Rand cred cannot be defeated. What I always say is Ayn Rand does not have all the answers, but she has all the questions. Ayn Rand teaches people how to think. She teaches people how to deduce to essentials and how to analyze information, and a healthy dose of skepticism toward the state, to put it mildly. And what Ayn Rand gives everyone is this intense sense that your life is important and how you live it matters. And in fact, you have no other choice but to ask yourself, what kind of person am I and what kind of person do I want to be? So I think extremely highly of her, even though it's really fun to poke fun at her because she is kind of a little bit humorless, and she's allowed that. If that's the worst you could say about someone, they're still a heroic figure. Well,
in some ways, I guess, like you, she's a bit of a misfit.
Oh, I think that's fair to say. Almost certainly, yeah.
What does it mean to be an anarchist?
An anarchist is someone who does not believe in the legitimacy of authority. As I kind of spell it out, anarchism means you do not speak for me and everything else is application.
How can you be both an anarchist and an American patriot? Do you not believe that any form of structure or government is needed in order to have a functioning society?
I noticed you did a little tap dance there when you said structure or government. As you know perfectly well, governments are very effective at destroying those voluntary structures that we all need in order to thrive as a community and as a nation. And as I've often said, democracy is people who run businesses well being forced to run businesses poorly by people who can't run businesses at all. So liberty is the mother of order, not the daughter. And governments are what interfere with creating these structures that work to encourage everyone to thrive.
So what structures do you like if you don't like government? What should
Let me
replace?
give you an example of anarchist systems. Music, physics, language, cuisine. These are all systems where there's no authority, there's no president of music, there's no emperor of physics. These are thousands of people over thousands of years voluntarily contributing. You can say, no, if you're going to make a bouillabaisse, it's got to be like this, and you're the French school, and I can respect your authority. I can say, screw you, this bouillabaisse is going to be made with, I don't know, salmon or something like that. So that is how anarchism works. It is a system that is made voluntarily as opposed to one imposed via force. And voluntary cooperation is what is the basis of human success.
Okay, so I'm as much of a liberty junkie as you and probably anybody else.
You are not, because you're not an anarchist.
Because my understanding is that humans are not basically good.
Correct.
And I think that when you talk about anarchy and leadership and government and structures, we have to consider the human condition, right?
Okay.
Where does evil come from?
I'm going to interrupt you because to equate government and structure is not legitimate. These are separate things.
So how do you create structure without some authority? Who is the authority?
PragerU, who's the authority here? Is there a government here? Is Dennis somehow the king of PragerU? If any time you can leave here, or you could say, if I want to stay, I want to raise. He can say, you know what? You're going to work here. You can't wear red. These are all voluntary rules that are put in place within the organization. They're done voluntarily without the state.
But the company, let's say my company in particular, it cannot function without some element of the state. For example, if a burglar comes and attacks.
Okay, so
right. So what we go to the police. The police comes in, right? My staff won't come if they knew that this place is unsafe because we have mob rule running in the streets, for example.
We have mob rule running in the streets because the government has abrogated to itself a monopoly on security. There's no reason whatsoever that a security, like any other service or product, has to be provided through a monopoly, let alone a government monopoly. In the same way that if it was the government's job to produce and distribute food, we will all end up starving, as happens in totalitarian countries to this day. It is when the government takes control of security, and we see this very effectively in big cities, that everyone is left not only unsafe in the streets, but unsafe in their own homes. Things like Daniel Penny in New York are a function of government. In an anarchist system, you would have far more security and be cheaper and more effective. It is the government's job to protect some of these truly evil human beings from the consequences of their actions. If you look at in England as a great example, these dads would go to jail in 2 seconds if they did what needed to be done to some of these grooming gangs.
So do you think there is any role of government whatsoever?
No.
No role
That's
of
what
government.
Anarchism means, correct.
So, okay. So what is your reaction to, let's say, the French Revolution?
I
explain it a little bit just in case. I know you know what I'm probably referring to.
It's a very complicated situation. So in terms of the French Revolution, I am fond of posting Robespierre, who was the father of the guillotine, his picture on Twitter with the caption "soon." It was obviously a very bloody situation. People equate anarchism with chaos, but throughout the French Revolution, there was a state and there were warring elements within that state. So it was not at all a voluntary system. It was very, in many ways, dictatorial. And if you crossed the state, it wasn't just the royals who, had their heads cut off. It very quickly became anyone who opposed the government.
So who applies the consequence to people who are truly evil? So I asked my kids this question last night as I was thinking about this conversation. And I said, kids, do you think that humans are possibly born evil, that some humans are born wicked? And my children's response was, no, all babies are wonderful. And I said to them, well, as you grow up, you're going to learn that some humans are just evil. They just have wickedness inside them. It's naive to not realize that. So I think we agree on that, right?
I'm going to comment a little bit, and you're going to agree with my comment. There's people who have evil within them, like someone who's philanderer, isn't loyal to his wife, and there's people who are pure evil. And these are separate phenomenon. Like someone who's like a shoplifter or, even treats his wife, smacks his wife around, that is elements of evil. But there's evil that is so much worse than that, that it's almost unfair to put those two into the same word.
I agree. It's there, and maybe even a third type of evil when sometimes people do evil things because they get something in return, which I think naive Hollywood has taught us that there's always an agenda. Well, why would they do something evil if they don't get anything in return, right? That's that simple-mindedness that we've been taught. And some people really just do evil things that we can't comprehend why they would do, right?
Right. That's correct. That happened in World War II, where a lot of the reports about what was going on by the Nazis was like, oh, please, why would they waste all these resources? They have two fronts. This doesn't make sense. Like, this is just exaggeration that was similar to the World War I propaganda. And then when Germany fell and the reporters and the politicians saw things for themselves, they're like, okay, if anything, the reports were understated.
Yeah, when Nazis made the prisoners just run around in circles for no good reason, they got nothing out of it, and eventually they killed them.
They got a sense of power.
Yeah. So knowing that there's evil in this world, how do we maintain civility and not chaos?
But the thing is, government is like a moth to a flame for evil people. It allows them to have an enormous sense of power, which evil people are drawn to, without having any kind of consequences. Imagine I get a job, and the worst thing that happens possibly is in 4 years, I might get fired. And I have 4 years or 6 years to run rampant with my depravity and corruption. That is what politics means. And it's no surprise that it's so common that people we look up to, maybe I don't want to say we, behind closed doors are just doing things at levels of depravity that average person would never think to dream of doing.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, I agree with you. We can't trust government entirely, and we can't give them all of the power to reign over us.
We're not giving them anything. They're taking it.
They are taking it, and to some degree, we're giving it by either being complacent or
That's true.
not pushing against it, right? So in some ways, if you're not doing anything, you're standing idly by, you're allowing for something to happen.
I agree with that.
So the founders of the United States of America realized that there needs to be some balance, that there's going to be evil in the world, and we're going to need to somehow organize and come together in order to protect ourselves from it. And that's why they had a system of government that provides some checks and balances. Now, it's not to say that those institutions can't be corrupted.
This is a bit of a historical history that's the equivalent of the 1619 Project.
Okay.
And I'll prove it to you.
All right, go.
The point of the checks and balances, supposedly, is that unless everyone's on the same page, government can't grow. We really want to keep it in check. The Constitution supposedly keeps the government as small as possible. They had that. They had the Articles of Confederation before that. They had no authority, and it worked so well that, as everyone talks about, Legs, it worked so well that they couldn't get together and make government grow. The Articles of Confederation worked the way the Constitution is supposed to. They went to Philadelphia. They had no authority to overthrow it. They looked at each other, goes, we're just throwing this in garbage, swore each other to secrecy. And then even though each of those states had legislatures already, they knew that many of those legislatures would not vote for this Constitution. So they did an end run around the duly elected legislatures to have these kind of little constitutional conventions because they knew they could push through that way. So not only was it done illegitimately, it was validated illegitimately. And even if you believe the Constitution is valid, it is only binding on the people who were there at the time of the signatories. 200 years later, it has no moral authority whatsoever. And the idea that the Constitution is effective, go to New York and try to get a handgun. The Second Amendment is not ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and there are all the amendments that have been brought onto it that have, eroded the original document.
We are subjects of the largest government in history. We've run the experiment. If the point of the Constitution is to make government small, the data has come in and the results are the exact opposite.
So what does America in full anarchy look like to you? Because
it looks like America. It looks like the America that you and I love, and the America that you and I want America to aspire to.
Describe.
It means people taking responsibility for their lives and their communities. It means a heavily armed population. It does not mean a legal system that protects murderers and punishes people who are like Kyle Rittenhouse and things like this. And it does not have this sense of reverence for people who win popularity contests. And it allows a economy where anyone has the capability of putting up their shingle and making things better for the sake of everyone and making a great profit in the process.
So do you view this as more less central power and more power within communities? Is
Absolutely.
that how it would work?
Absolutely.
And I know you corrected me when I said government and structure. So I want to go into structures a little bit. What are your thoughts on structures such as religion, let's say?
Wonderful.
You're pro-religion.
Yes. I'm not religious.
Yeah.
I personally know, and you personally know, and everyone listening to this personally knows, people in their lives who found faith and decided, I'm going to try to live a moral life as a consequence of this. Mm-hmm. That in and of itself is such a major point in the religion's camp that it really kind of negates a lot of the negative points. So I think people and religion, churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever your faith is, are a great source of community. It instead of having the government provide for your health care or be your nanny, when people know, okay, this person is a layabout, so why are we helping them, wasting our money? This person just had a run of bad luck. Let's all chip in together and help out this family. It's a far more effective system than this blank check for everyone to get it indiscriminately based on merit.
So why aren't you more religious? Do you not believe, let's say, I mean, you're Jewish, right? So do you not believe the Torah, for example, came from God? Is that?
I just really like sushi.
You can eat sushi.
I can't keep kosher.
Yeah.
And I'm lazy enough that basically Shabbos is every day. I don't like working.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the Old Testament is a source of morality? Where do you get your morality from?
I get my morality from my conscience, right? Which is a weak answer to some people, but I think most people who think of themselves and take their lives seriously, I just suffer from guilt very strongly, right? So if there's something I did wrong, that completely undermines my self-image because you can't, it's the same way that like, if you kill one person, you're a murderer. Even if you do great things for the rest of your life before that and after that one thing. If I am mean to a friend, rude, do the wrong thing, I can't call myself a moral person because I knowingly did wrong. And unless I atone and make amends for that, my whole self-image is ruined. So it comes from this sense of, I have one shot. Life is a great gift. What kind of person do I want to be? And that answer is clearly Dennis Prager.
So what is your vision for an anarchist society, let's say with people like you who rely on...
I don't think there would be people like me, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, you're definitely unique, one of a kind. But if your source of morality is your own head and your own heart...
Well, I didn't say that in the anarchist. Religion is completely compatible with anarchism. It's not a government. The Pope isn't, king.
You would need religion probably even more in the case of an anarchist society.
Sure, or at least a sense of morality. Absolutely.
Right. Yes. How do you teach a child a sense of morality without any sort of structure that you can't rely on their hearts, right?
Again, like you keep thinking anarchy as opposed to structure. I'm in favor of structure. I'm in favor of as much structure as possible. I just think government is very counterproductive in terms of creating structure and imposing it.
So non-governmental structures,
yes,
like religion.
Religion's example.
Any thoughts on the structure of marriage?
Great.
Why do communist countries like the ones you've studied have the exact opposite view of what you describe? So they believe in big government, no religion, no family structure. Explain how that plays out.
I don't like the term big government because there's no such thing as big government. There's just government you approve of. Our current government is $4 trillion, and you seem to like it fine. So
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had your druthers, how big would the government be?
As close to zero as possible, but I'm not sure quite zero.
But zero is as close to zero as possible. So what's your answer?
0.01.
So 101 what?
I think the government should provide safety for the people.
Can you give me an example of the government doing that?
our current government is corrupt and there's a problem. But I do think that why is America a beacon of hope for the world? Because we do have some systems where we've been able to elect Donald Trump, or I'm not saying he's the Messiah, but he is making a lot of the changes that we're hoping to see. Is it going to be the solution forever? No, because there is no utopia on planet Earth.
I just asked you to give me an example where government provides safety and just gave me this long speech that completely avoids the question because you can't do it. Governments do not provide safety. Citizenry provides safety. A moral citizenry provides safety where people are responsible for the communities. And if you had like an Uber system for people who, let's suppose you have to pass licensing. There's lots of ex-military who don't know what to do with themselves. If you could call on them and they could be raided instead of the cops who can kill you with no consequences, can you not acknowledge how that might be a great improvement over what we have?
Yes, but I think America is still a great improvement over, let's say, Somalia, where it's in the 90s, they decided that they're basically an anarchist society. And
they did not. But the point is, I'd rather have the flu than cancer, but doesn't mean the flu is good.
Same.
Right.
It's the same point, right? You don't have a perfect government, but maybe some government is needed, but you can't judge it based on whether it's perfect or not.
Sure. Okay. So again, can you give me an example of government providing security?
I mean, there's some security. I know that if somebody goes and shoots my neighbor, I can go to the police and there will be some consequence.
Oh yeah, what percent of those cases are actually resolved in America?
I don't know the percentage.
What percent would make you be like, this is completely unacceptable?
What is the percentage that you think is?
I think it's way under 50 is my understanding. I don't have the number handy.
Yeah.
But my point is we think, because thankfully neither of us, I'm positive for you, but I'm fairly certain, no situation like this. God forbid it ever happens to you or anyone we know. And we watch TV and the cops won't stop until they figure out what happens. That's not real life.
And you believe it doesn't there's no actual consequence.
Again, this isn't just my belief. If we looked it up, the number is much lower than either of us would consider acceptable if we were like taking an exam and go, okay, under what number would you say the system has to be overturned? The number's under that.
Yeah. So it's very disheartening to believe that we have a power over us that is claiming that they're helping us, but they're actually not doing the things that they're claiming.
And they're making it worse because how many people were murdered by the government during COVID?
Mm-hmm. Many.
Right. How many elderly people? These people, every single one of those governors was reelected instead of, hanging from a lamppost.
Do you think your view of this distrust in government and I guess your discernment comes from what you've studied around the world, communism, visiting North Korea?
No, I think it comes from, I just never understood the idea that having a monopoly on security or monopoly on food, monopoly on education, when it was only public education, I think everyone listening to this knows what the consequences were, that is the best we can do. That makes no sense to me. And the other thing is, one of my quotes I always say is, the enemy class is not composed of impressive people. When you look at senators, congressmen, especially on a local level, you're like, you know what? This is who I want making decisions for my life. It's laughable. Like you're laughing, but that's the system you're advocating for.
Yeah. I mean, I'd lean into this even further when it comes to education. Parents are told that they should not teach their kids anything because they don't have a master's degree in education,
right.
But sit down with these teachers that are supposedly the experts and realize that many of them know less than you as a parent.
But that's the same model for security. Everyone listening to this knows they would rather have a gun handy than a cop 5 minutes away. God forbid something happens in their house. This is the only person that can provide security for yourself and your family is you. This is not some crazy anarchist view. Every conservative increasingly has come to understand this. So
you would say the parallel of my observation from the world of education, which is the parent can do better than any expert for their child. You would apply that across the board to all the other institutions.
Right. And if the parent can't do it themselves, which is often the case, wouldn't it be better to get a tutor or someone in the neighborhood, let's pull our resources together, than just hope for someone that, Barack Obama appointed? So
what would you do? I'm assuming you would say yes on dismantling Department of Education.
Well, that's an understatement, yes.
So what would
I would in favor of dismantling the employees.
Right. So then what would you do after? What does that look like? How do we educate young Americans?
Oh, I thought you meant the guillotines. How do we educate young Americans? First of all, it is insane to me. Like this, let me tell a a lot of times we'll get ideas in our head and we've had them our whole lives. And then you stop and question and you're like, what? And I'll give you like a very funny, non-political example. When I was like 5, there was like a little period of time I really liked washing dishes. I thought I was a grown-up, whatever. And my mom said to me, she goes, careful that you rinse that dishwasher and look it off. It's poisonous, you get really sick. And I'm like, okay. Then I, being a guy, I stopped washing dishes. And when I was in college, my friend came over my house. She ate something. She was very polite. She started rinsing it off. And I said to her, oh, make sure you rinse that off. I don't want to get sick. And I'll never forget this. She stops at the sink, pauses, and she's like, how do I talk to him? She turns to me, she goes, don't you think of all the things that they make poisonous, this is the one thing they wouldn't? And I stopped and I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, the ceramic is not porous. Second, it has a taste. Third of all, how much are you going to ingest anyway? And fourth of all, you can drink the whole bottle of Joy and you'll be fine. It's non-toxic at all. And I asked my mom why she said this and she's like, I don't remember this. I have no idea. The fact that we all go to school at the same time and have to sit in a chair for the same amount of time and all learn at the same time. Everyone watching this knows you have certain skills that you're better at. Maybe you're great at math. Maybe I'm better at woodworking. I don't know. We all have to learn at the same rate, the same exact thing. It makes absolutely no sense. The entire education, and when you stop and point that out, you're like, yeah, why are we all learning at the same rate at the same hours? It makes no sense because it's the Prussian model. The idea was, this came over in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we're going to create a nation of little soldiers or the equivalent little factory workers, so everyone will be a cog in a machine. It is designed not to educate, but to break the spirits of young children, especially independent thinkers. And that's why I always say that government schools are literal prisons for children and the only place many people will ever experience violence in their lifetimes. Some parents be like, it's a good thing that you learn, if you're trapped in a school, if you're bullied or someone you hate.
To socialize.
Right. But it's like, there's no other place anywhere as an adult where if I really hate you, I have to be locked in a situation with you. If it's a job, I can quit or I try to get you fired. There's no other situation. That's not a good lesson to learn. That's a terrible lesson to learn.
Yeah, there's no other situation where you're only hanging out with people who are exactly your age every single day, right? That's why so many kids can't talk to grown-ups.
Great point.
Where if they're homeschooled, they can talk to people of all ages, right?
This you triggered me because coming from Brooklyn, we're taught this idea that homeschooled kids are all freaks and weirdos. Yeah. And then I met some, and to have a conversation with a child who is confident and respectful, like they know you're the adult, they're the kid, but they're eager to learn. Government schools are the best way to get kids to hate reading and learning. You meet these homeschool kids, they want to talk to you about, I learned about the seashells, I learned about clouds. They can't wait to tell.
Curious.
They're curious and they're excited. And these are the kids who going to a museum would be fun, whereas government schools, it's punishment. So the lie about homeschooling kids is something that fills me with such a sense of rage, I can't even talk.
Yeah, most entrepreneurs would rather hire a homeschool kid, knowing that they have discernment and independence and all of that. The independence
is the big one, because it's like, if I'm like, okay, I need this done by Wednesday, and on Wednesday they have a perfect paper for me, it's a miracle. Right. Reliability is the best thing people can compete on.
Did your parents know that when they didn't want to send you to government school as a kid, when they came from Ukraine?
They knew. Oh, yes.
They knew that government schools would be a problem.
Yes.
Or they just distrusted government so much.
No, they knew government schools would be a problem, especially in New York City. And they were right.
Because they were not religious, but they sent you to Orthodox religious school.
Right.
And what was that like for you?
Well, it was very funny because, I recently I went to Yeshiva Flatbush till 4th grade. And I recently ran into a friend of mine from 1st grade, we reconnected, Rena. And I had to pretend that I was religious, that we kept kosher at home, at school. And it was interesting because we just came off the boat from Russia, right? There's no religion in Russia. It's illegal. So they knew this in the administration. So I asked Rena, and I'm like, did they know I was like putting on a front and look the other way? Or did they believe it? Or maybe they thought, okay, he's like,
he'll get there.
He'll get there, right? And she goes, I don't know. And we asked her mom, and she's like, I have no idea if they knew or not. It's very interesting. But there was one day, this is so funny. The teacher goes, okay, who here doesn't keep kosher at home? I'm about to raise my hand and look over at Flora, who's the other Russian kid. And she goes, keep my hand down. And Mark raised his hand. Come with me. They took Mark out of the class. And when he came back a while later, after they called in his parents, he was in tears.
Aww.
So, yeah.
I want you to describe why you decided to write your books on communism, because these are dense and heavy, but I also feel like it's a time where we need to know what has happened around the world. And my guess is that's why you decided to do it. It's not an easy task to visit something so evil.
The white pill, it's the reason I wrote The White Pill is because many people who have the same political persuasions that I do thought it's a wrap. Thought either America or the West is lost, game over, we can't win. And to me, this was completely crazy. And I'm obviously not some Pollyanna figure that everything works out well all the time. That's not my view at all. Because I knew the history. And I'm like, how can you say this? So I remember I was on a podcast and they were going on how Joe Biden's a communist. And I'm like, do you know what that means? Like, he's a corporate hack, right? He's not some Marxist ideologue. And I sat there and I'm like, it's shocking to me that conservatives don't know the story of the fall of the Soviet Union, because this is conservatism's biggest victory. Like, for decades, the Cold War defined entirely our American foreign policy. And then Reagan and Thatcher came in and, without firing a shot, effectively ended peacefully the Cold War. Like, there's statues. We love war so much in this country that if like thousands or millions of people are killed, that's great. But when a war ends peacefully, there's no statues, there's no celebration, which I think is very, very twisted. So I'm like, you know what? Jackass, that's how I refer to myself. If they won't tell the story, you tell the story. And that's exactly what I did. So I think it's important for people. And this happened in our lifetimes. This isn't Mars, 3,000 years ago. In our lifetimes, an enormous evil that had been entrenched for decades in many countries that defined everything in the world in terms of a reaction or actually imposing itself fell very quickly, very easily. And this is a story of hope.
How is something so evil a story of hope? Explain what white pill means.
The white pill just means hope. The point of the white pill is not the book. The concept is it's possible that we will lose. It's impossible that we must lose. If someone's telling you there's no way you can win, like, that's ridiculous, because again, it's happened before under harder auspices.
Do you think that people around the world in other countries like the UK, our friends in the UK, is there hope that the UK will be free?
I don't think so. Not in the near future.
I think it's so mind-boggling because
they want the cage.
It's the people want the cage.
Yes, they want the cage.
It's especially hard because they speak English like us.
No, they don't. They speak English not like us.
Well, not like us, but you think that in an Anglo country, you would not expect people to be so averse to fight for freedom.
But why? I mean, we were the freaks. We were the misfits. We're the ones who fought for freedom.
We continue to be.
Right. But the point is, we rebelled against King George. So they were never a freedom-loving country. They were an imperialist country. They never have loved freedom in the same way that Americans do.
What about Canada? What do you is Canada going to become the 51st state?
So,
I'm not good at making impersonation.
I'm advocating for, there are 41 million African Americans. There's 40 million Canadians. This is how we solve America's racist past. Enslave Canada. Every African American gets one Canadian. Slavery in the South, abhorrent. Slavery in the North, the opposite. It's good. And that's going to be the reparations that'll stick.
And that will ensure that this interview will be censored.
No, this interview will be promoted because we're advocating reparations.
Oh, that's right. Of course.
I'm on the right side of history.
Always. Absolutely. All right. Let me get back into education.
Yes.
So I think part of the issue for parents like me is that we know what is wrong with the schools, and that's very easy to articulate, right? We're not seeing creativity. We are not seeing problem solving. It's the horseman machine. But
hold on. I think you'd also agree there's things that are wrong in the schools that you don't even pick up on. or that I wouldn't pick up on, that are working on like a subliminal level, that are truly malevolent, and it's just under the radar.
Like what? And do you believe there's a nefarious agenda behind it,
yes,
or it's just
of course
happening?
There's a nefarious agenda behind it. How could you just, how there's a nefarious agenda behind it? Because if you or I were chefs at a restaurant, and let's suppose we undercooked chicken and some kid got really sick or God forbid died, we would lose our minds. And the first thing we do tomorrow is, all right, we are going through our process from beginning to end. This can never happen again. I don't know how I can look at myself in the mirror. This is absolutely unconscionable, right? Just once. Is that their reaction when these things start happening? Or is the reaction like, oh, it's not a big hand wave? Forget it. You're the one making it a problem. So that's how you know it's not done in good faith.
What are those examples of things that you think people are not seeing that's happening, not that obvious? That's
showing completely inappropriate imagery to children. Like that's something.
Pornographic.
5 years ago, it would be like, this is going to happen. It's like, okay, you take off your tinfoil hat, Alex Jones. And what's amazing is not only is it happening, you're being told to your face, it's not happening. Where it's just like, you don't take my word for it. Here's the images. You can't even show them on TV. So that's the sort of thing that is malevolent, depraved.
So Elon Musk asked me this question. If there is a nefarious agenda, who is running the agenda in America's schools? Who is running this evil through our schools?
Activists. I think
American activists, yes. Communists. Is this communism attacking America?
The communists weren't evil in this sense. So there are the universities where the poisoning starts. I've said this from day one. You have a population of people who are trained in promoting insane demonic ideology. They go like moths to a flame to where those positions are made for them. And once they're there, they know what their job is and they know how to get in under the radar. And that's kind of how it works.
And who is training them? Is it a group?
The universities.
So who is informing the universities? Is it an individual? That's the question.
I don't think there is this, 1980s movie like Lex Luthor, big bad villain. I think it is decentralized in the sense that like there's not one person. If you took out George Soros or Alexander Soros tomorrow, this would not
go away.
It's not going away. Right. It's systemic.
Yeah. So what would you do if you had a kid going? Would you send them to a private school? Would you homeschool them? Would you send them to college? Would you be worried that if you don't send your kids through these institutions, they're not going to have a job? Society's not going to know what to do with them. That's the fear that parents have. I do believe that the silver lining of the lockdowns has been that parents have been waking up. They're seeing that the schools are failing us. They're seeing the gender affirming care, the lowering of standards, the lowering of everything. But they don't really know what to do. They don't know what to do with their kids.
They're not waking up in huge numbers. Let's be honest. Okay. Let's take separate things. If you have a population that's homeschooled 15%, America's saved. Because you have 15% of the population that is conscious and has discernment, like you say, and can think for themselves, and they're like kind of self-aware of this, they're going to outnumber the mindless herds easily and run the table on them. So that's something I'm very hopeful about the future. In terms of what advice I'd give to parents, if I was a parent, first of all, going to college is still a credential. So no matter what anyone says watching this, if you have that Yale diploma, you're set for life. What I have been advocating for a long time is to seize all university endowments and distribute that money as reparations, because universities are the crystallization of privilege. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think there is increasing, and this is nothing anyone has to do. It is easier and easier for anyone to create their own business, including a kid, create a website, and start developing those skills and products. So not only are you going to have that independent wealth at an early age, and when you're 18, having $1,000, you're like loaded, right? But at the same time, if you're applying for jobs and I'm hiring someone with a, moderately good school, as opposed to I ran this online website for 4 years, who am I going to hire? It's going to be night and day. So I think that is going to lead to the increasing collapse of our university system. But it's never going to go away because it's always going to be a social credential.
How different is America today in 2025 from last year?
Oh, I mean, I have never in my lifetime seen and I hate using this term, but I will use it in this case because it's correct, the left, which is a huge umbrella of coalitions, some of whom disagree, so befuddled.
You just reminded me of Dennis for a minute.
Oh, okay. I've never seen them so befuddled. There are things that people were freaking out about Trump doing in his first term. He overfed the fish, too many scoops of ice cream. He has typos on his Twitter. They're having meltdowns about. He's overturning DEI and affirmative action executive orders from the Johnson administration, which is 60 years ago, 55 years ago. And they're just like, oh, well, the price of eggs went up. So even things that are genuine attacks on their values, they're kind of letting it go. I have never seen anything like this.
Is it because they just can't keep up?
I think that there were lots of people in the corporate press who got sick of the DEI and having that DEI hire in their office yelling at them and telling them how terrible they are, that they're like, you know what? We're just taking a wash. When Officer Harris in her campaign went for taxing unrealized gains, which means like Elon Musk, let's suppose he has 20 billion, whatever it is. He doesn't have a bank account with $20 billion. That's in stock. It's in factories. It's not. So if you're going to tax him, he's going to have to start selling things. This leads to collapses of businesses. And so a lot of investors, when they saw her put this forward, is like, this woman doesn't understand industry at all. And if this goes forward, it's going to lead to the collapse of the American economy. It's not the same as raising taxes on capital gains or income, something like that. So I think a lot of people are in the same way that in the 2000s or whatever it was, when the Supreme Court settled gay marriage, there were a lot of Republicans leading up to that who were like, it was getting harder and harder for them because as gay marriage became more accepted, for them to take that fight, they're alienating a lot of people and they're gaining very little as a result. So they're like, ugh. So when it kind of got taken out of their hands, they're like, well, it's settled. And now they could just keep their mouths shut and make it go away. I think a lot of leftists are happy that some of this stuff is being happening because they don't have to have it on their hands. Like, oh, well, crazy Trump's doing it, so boo-hoo.
Do you think Donald Trump didn't just win the presidency, but he won the culture? Is that what you're describing?
No. We're in LA. He did not win the culture.
So the culture...
There's at least two cultures in this country, and they have been since the beginning. There are places in this country where, with Jesse Kelly, I was talking about this, where having an American flag is literally the same as having a Klan hood in their eyes.
Yes.
We do not have the same culture.
And how do we reconcile that? Do we need to?
The only reason it's a problem is because government locks us into a group together. If you have people in California who want to do their own thing and they hate the American flag and I don't have to have any kind of engagement with them, more power to you. Knock yourselves out. You want to burn down your houses? Great. Go nuts. I will be perfectly happy in the Republic of Texas.
As you are.
Yes, I am.
You like your life in Austin?
I love it.
How do you think Donald Trump is doing on the world stage? There are a lot of moves over there, specifically given how much you've studied Russia.
Sure. So one of the things that Trump is doing very well, and hear me out, I know people listening to this are going to lose their minds. Calm down.
If you say the word Ukraine, Russia, that's going to be...
North Korea did very well for decades by coming off as crazy. And one of the things I talk about in my book, Dear Reader, I walk through the system and go, this is a very cleverly designed program that they put in place for decades. There's a reason they outlasted everybody else, except for Cuba. This is not by accident. Boris Johnson did this when he was negotiating Brexit, because he just admitted this recently in his autobiography. He goes, I told them if I have to do a no-deal Brexit and just walk, I'm going to do it. He's like, I never would have done that. That's crazy. But they believed it. So when you are perceived, and we've all had maybe that ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, colleague that you have to work with, and they're a crazy person, you don't want to negotiate with them because you're like, I don't like me and you. I'm confident if you and I had to have some kind of discussion or argument, it would be fine. You know?
I don't know. I'm pretty crazy.
Yeah, but you're not North Korea crazy.
No.
Right. You're not Trump crazy in the sense that calling Denmark and being like, yeah, we're getting Greenland, whether you like it or not. And she's like, haha, goes, I'm not kidding. So that is...
And everybody is like, wait, did he actually mean it?
Right.
I think he actually meant it.
Right. That is something I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather, these other countries are always going to have this weird inferiority complex about America. So I think it's a good thing that they got a little too comfortable. And I like that they're getting uncomfortable, and let them have their little coffee clatches and tut-tut-tut about, I can't believe America elected President Trump. We're the big dog. We should act like it.
Do you think it's possible that Donald Trump would be able to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war? And
Yes.
what do you think, if you could just digest for us, let's put it in our clay pots in history, what do you think went down there?
I don't think anyone knows, and I think that's by design, right? Like whatever's going on behind the scenes with Zelensky, we can't have that public because Putin reads those papers, same as vice versa. I think a deal could have been cut a long time ago. I think it seems to me, although people disagree with this, so I could be wrong, I'm not an authority in this area in contemporary times, it seemed to me that there was a gun to Zelensky's head being like, you can't settle. And there was a huge incentive for a lot of people to keep this war going for a long time. I think the losses are horrific. My only hope is that it gets resolved as quickly as possible without one more life being lost. I don't know what the win condition is for the Ukraine side, because people are like, we can't let Putin get away with this, blah, blah. Not getting away with this means taking Putin out. Because even if he loses everything that he fought for, the borders returned back to where Russia started, he did get away with it. He had no consequences, right? So no one is really advocating with a straight face to invade Russia and take out Putin. So at some point, you're cutting a deal. He is getting away with it. What that's going to look like is up to the parties involved, what cost to come with bearing. But this kind of World War II model or Iraq War model, that the only way wars are resolved is with complete domination, destruction, is really, I think, a bad idea.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be the president's
no, not at
vision
all.
either at all. What do you think the U.S.'s role should be on the world stage? I mean, you see this even on the right, even though I know you're not a conservative, but you see this on the left where people say, we have our own problems here in the United States. We don't need to get involved in wars outside of the United States. We don't need to fund both sides of the war. You're an anarchist.
Sure.
So what's your observation when it comes to America getting involved in foreign wars?
I'm as opposed to it as possible, but what I'm in favor of, and which is happening organically and naturally, is American cultural imperialism. People around the world watch American movies, American TV shows, American music, things like this. We have fondnesses for other nations when we interact with them and their culture. America has enormous fondness for our arch enemies, the Japanese. So much of Japanese culture has come here. So much of American culture has taken root in Japan, things like this. So that, I think, is a great source of American strength and a great source of world peace. If you and another culture like each other, respect each other, you're not going to go to war, or it's much less likely that you're going to go to war. I think it's crazy that we have military bases in like Germany and South Korea and all these other places. I would be strongly in favor of pulling them back as much as possible.
Could the internet free the world?
I don't think the world wants to be free. Like, I don't know what you mean by that, though.
I think your point is that the more exposed they are to freedom and what America stands for, the more they'd be willing to open their minds and maybe fight for their own rights, right?
Some
That's
people,
what your
sure,
point
yes,
is.
some would, yes.
But then you're saying some other people simply don't want
Correct,
freedom.
they don't want
So it's
that.
like the typical biblical story of the Jews or the Israelites walking out of Egypt and then complaining and whining that they don't have meat anymore,
Right.
and therefore they wanted to go back to Egypt
Right.
where it was safe, but they were not free.
Right.
So the human condition is that it may not want freedom.
That's right. I had this exact conversation with Jordan Peterson on January 6th. To quote Mencken, the average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. We saw this during COVID.
And the American DNA is different, or we're just lucky?
It's not that different, again, as we saw during COVID. Like, there were a lot of people that you and I think were very surprised. I don't mean individuals, I mean populations that were desperate to bend the knee.
Mm-hmm.
Could not wait. We're perfectly happy. The fact that there were no anarchist consequences, to use euphemism, for Governor Cuomo and Gretchen Whitmer is a huge surprise to me.
Have you ever been surprised by changing somebody's assumptions on something you thought they would never change their mind on, and
Yes.
any memorable moments?
Yes. I am shocked that conservatives have changed their minds on the police. I'm shocked. To what extent? It was part and parcel of conservatism until not that long ago. And now when I tell conservatives two things: if the government passes laws to round up guns, the cops wouldn't hesitate. And also, if we had these kind of free speech laws like they have in the UK, where you're going to be arrested for Facebook, the cops would be happy to fall in line. The overwhelming amount of conservatives I talk to are like, but they know I'm not talking crazy. They're like, I can see it. That to me is a shocking sea change from not that long ago.
What do you think conservatives are getting wrong?
What, just broadly speaking?
Something we should rethink.
I think conservatives get wrong so much that the focus is DC and the Democratic Party. The media runs the Democratic Party, not the other way around. And the media is programmed by the universities. So you're playing in the fourth quarter. If you're worrying about Nancy Pelosi, you should be worried about Harvard and Yale.
So interesting. What is something that you never thought you would change your mind on and your assumptions were changed?
I thought Trump was learning disabled. He's the first boomer in history who's actually learned anything. It's absolutely amazing. That first debate with Biden, where he kept his mouth shut and let Biden hang himself, is something that none of us had ever seen in a debate from Trump before. Whoever sat him down and was like, shut up, let him do his own dirty work, and he got through to him is just shocking to me. The fact that he's the first president, I think ever, who has over-delivered on his promises when he got inaugurated. Like half these things that he's doing in his first few days was not on the radar screen, and he's making them happen. It was just like, this does not happen in politics. So I kind of had this joke about like, imagine how awesome he would be if they got his other ear. And then people point out, what if it's like a cartoon where like one makes you awesome and then the other one kind of knocks you back? But the fact that he's changed, he's a known commodity. We all saw him his first term. None of this stuff was on the radar. So I don't know. I mean, I can guess how this happened, but that is something I was very shocked about.
Are there things you're contemplating now that you think you're going to change your mind on? Is this something you do? I know that you're very active at changing other people's minds. How does your mind work? Are you constantly revisiting your assumptions?
The thing I'm fixated on right now is, and I don't know what my assumption is or my conclusion is, to be more specific. In the same way that if you and I sat down with someone who's like a Stephen Hawking and he started to explain physics to us, it would be like gibberish. We were just smiling and nodding, right? Because his intellect is on a level that you and I can't wrap our heads around. People who are dumber than us, I mean, just dumb people, we think it's like Joey on Friends, like they don't know facts and they're slow in the uptake. Their modes of cognition are effectively alien to our own. Like they think in entirely different ways than people at a certain IQ level. The same way people with our IQ level or whatever can't understand Stephen Hawking. And democracy, or politics in general, is based on the idea that everyone basically thinks the same. Mm-hmm. And when you realize that that's literally not true and that people don't process information in the same way or to the same degree of veracity, that is something I've been fixated on recently to a great extent and what the implications of that are. We're at a point right now, and I'm the only person I've seen who's like freaking out about this. I don't know if freaking out's the right word, where ChatGPT is a better conversationalist than the average human. Okay. So what happens when the car is invented? What happens to all those horses? So if I can't rely on you to work a cash register or be personable, what value can that person bring?
You're right. The hope is creativity and discernment. But if you interact with AI as much as I do, you realize that AI is very quickly able to do that better than most humans.
Right.
Yeah. What do you hope to be remembered for, Michael Malice? When you're gone?
What do I hope to be remembered for? That's a great, great question. I think my books are a large part of my legacy because that's really cool for me as an author, that knowing when I die, they're going to be on that shelf. I just hope I'm remembered. Let's leave it at that. Like if anyone who's remembered for a long time after they're gone, they in a positive sense, they did something right.
Well, we're putting you into our clay pots, so you'll be remembered.
What's that mean?
So the Hebrews realized that while they're going to be thrown all over the Middle East, mostly when they were kicked out of their land, they realized that they had to chronicle everything they've learned.
Right.
And they put the Dead Sea Scrolls into clay pots. And the clay pots preserved everything they learned and knew in their way of life. And even though, thousands of years later, they're long gone, their ideas are still there. Yeah. And your ideas will still be here with PragerU.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's great. It was great having you on.
You are welcome.